He was the epitome of a gangster, mixing with the rich and the famous. He used corruption and murder to climb his way to the top of the Chicago underworld, and was involved in the most infamous assassinations of the 20th century. This is the real mob story of Sam Giancana. October 1939, Sam Giancana had been sentenced to 4 years for being involved in running an illegal alcohol still. The 31-year-old had made a name for himself in the Chicago underworld under the tutelage of men such as Murray Humphreys, Paul Ricca, and Tony Accardo. Now forced to cool his heels at Terre Haute Penitentiary in Indiana, Giancana would ponder his next move. During his stay at Terre Haute, Giancana would meet an important man. The introduction to the newly found friend would trigger a series of events that would lead to Giancana being a serious player in Chicago's outfit. The man in question was Eddie Jones. Jones was the leader of a gambling racket called Policy. It was a lottery that was particularly popular in African American communities at the time. A player would buy a ticket costing a nickel and choose 3 numbers. The prize money was $30, sometimes less, and every day a numbered wheel was spun 3 times, giving the results to the lottery. As simple as it sounded, the illegal racket was making young black men very wealthy. Giancana was immediately gripped on hearing about Jones and the lucrative Policy business. The two became friends, and Jones even agreed that when he got out, he and Giancana would go into business together. With Giancana's connections and Jones' grip on the Policy market, it could be a winning combination. Well, that's what Jones thought anyway. When Giancana was finally released just before Christmas 1942, he'd tell his youngest brother Chuckie, "This Jones has everything. He's invested in money in legitimate investments, a Ben Franklin store, 4 hotels, a food market, and several apartment buildings. But most of all, this guy has real estate. He's got a place here, a villa in Mexico, and one in France. You gotta see this guy's wife. She's a Cotton Club beauty. She dresses in chic outfits, diamonds, furs, you name it. Really something. The guy's house here is beautiful too. Antique tapestries, oil paintings, and real gold fixtures. This guy's got it made. I thought these black kids were lazy. Boy, was I wrong. These guys are making real money over here," Giancana told his young brother. Chuckie would picture the scene like a young child being told a captivating bedtime story. He could see the look on his brother's face and knew what he was thinking. Giancana wanted what Jones had, and why shouldn't he? He had come far growing up on the mean streets of the Patch. Part of a violent young gang called the 42s, Giancana learnt his trade in violence, murder, and extortion. The 42s were seen as an extension of the outfit. However, some of the old-timers saw them as being too wild. Giancana had shown the leaders that he was a capable enforcer, but he knew that if he wanted to make it big in the outfit, he'd have to give the bosses what they loved the most: money, and lots of it. Eddie Jones was just the ticket. Giancana set up a meeting with Tony Accardo to discuss the idea of the outfit moving into the Policy rackets. Accardo was a serious guy, known as Joe Batters, or simply as JB, a moniker he was given for using a baseball bat as his preferred weapon of choice when exacting punishment on those who had upset the outfit. He'd risen through the ranks of the underworld to become one of its leading men. The Chicago outfit hadn't a clue that vast money was being made by the black community in the policy rackets. Accardo gave Giancana his blessing to get the job done. Once he was given the green light, his men would slowly maneuver themselves into positions where they'd start muscling in on the rackets. Close friends of Eddie Jones warned him about his ties with the Italians. They thought allowing them into the rackets would be a recipe for disaster, but the policy king of Chicago ignored the warnings. In December 1943, the leading figures of the Chicago outfit were sent to jail. It was an unplanned setback. The front man for the outfit at the time, a man by the name of Frank Nitti, was meant to take the fall for the case. But instead, Nitti put a gun to his own head and blew his brains out. As a result, the de facto head of the outfit, a man by the name of Paul the Waiter Ricca, was sent to jail along with other members of the outfit. Seeing the silver lining, Giancana took the opportunity to forge closer ties with Accardo, who was now running the show in Ricca's absence. With the outfit leaders behind bars, the ambitious Giancana sensed an opportunity to move up the ladder. He decided to kidnap a man called Jacob Greasy Thumb Guzik. Guzik was a leading figure in the outfit and Al Capone's right-hand man since the early days. Guzik was a genius with numbers and was instrumental in the outfit thriving in its ventures over the decades. As Guzik's eyes began to adjust to the light, he saw a shadowy figure standing in front of him. It was Giancana. "You know, Jake, I got a lot of respect for you. You taught me the ropes, but things have moved on now. I'm not a kid anymore. I went to college, did my time, and I kept my mouth shut. Now I gotta get what's coming to me. I know you got everyone's ear at the top. I need you to put some good words in for me with the guys up there and make some room." Guzik knew he meant with Ricca, Accardo, and Humphreys. "You got a choice, Jake. You can take this." Giancana slid a bag over to Guzik. "There's $200,000 in there. You can take it and do what I asked you, or I can keep the money and you don't leave here." It took Guzik 2 days of deliberation to be finally persuaded to take the money and do what Giancana wanted. And true to his word, he did. Giancana's maneuvering worked. What was left of the syndicate after Ricca's jail term fell into place. Giancana's ascension to the top would be aided soon after when he was appointed as Tony Accardo's driver, a powerful position in the mob as they would hear all outfit business. A year later in 1946, he was made underboss in the Chicago outfit. Eddie Jones was released in 1945 and went straight back to the policy wheels downtown. It was a day in early May 1946 when Eddie Jones and his wife Lydia had just dropped off a cashier in their Ben Franklin store. As the limo driver was returning to his car after walking the cashier into her building, he saw 2 men rush over to the limousine and drag Jones out of the car. The men were armed with sawn-off shotguns and had their faces covered with handkerchiefs. As they dragged the policy king from the car, his wife Lydia tried to cling to his neck and was screaming. In seconds, they had pulled him into the back of a getaway vehicle and, accompanied by a second car, sped off. The screaming had got the attention of a police car. It gave chase, but when a volley of shots rained down on it from the backup car, injuring one of the officers, the pursuit ended. Jones was held for ransom in a basement in Oak Park. A few days later, a $250,000 ransom was paid, and Jones was freed with tape over his eyes and cotton stuffed into his ears. Giancana gave Jones an ultimatum: either get the fuck out of town or take a bullet to the head. Jones got the message loud and clear and quickly moved his family far away. Giancana now controlled all of Eddie Jones' wheels, impressing Accardo and the others mightily, and by August he had gained complete control of all of Chicago's numbers game. There was only one man that stood in Giancana's way for complete domination over the policy rackets. Teddy Rowe was an African-American policy boss who built an illegal gambling empire in Southside Chicago during the 1940s and 1950s. Rowe earned the nickname Robin Hood because of his philanthropy among the neighborhood poor. He started off as a humble tailor's assistant until he met Eddie Jones. Jones would teach Rowe about the policy rackets, and it wasn't long before he started climbing the ladder in the business. Rowe was effectively the last man standing in the outfit's way. Instead of fleeing or giving up his business, the tough racketeer held firm against the outfit. Giancana was hesitant to kill Rowe. He respected him and what he'd achieved, and most of all, Rowe wasn't a punk. He'd held off numerous attempts to take over his business. Giancana bided his time. Sooner or later, Rowe would slip up, and Giancana would take control. Giancana was getting tired of not being able to take over the last policy business standing. He sent his main lieutenant, Fat Lenny Caifano, to try to work out a partnership with him, but Rowe refused. They bombed Rowe's house, sent him threatening packages, and even offered him $250,000 to leave. Still, Rowe refused to give up his operations. He became a hero in the black community and was nicknamed the Robin Hood of policy. In reality, the outfit was already pleased with the takeover of the numbers game and was not concerned about the Rowe situation. To Giancana, however, Rowe's resistance was a constant source of frustration, and he finally decided to kidnap Rowe and hold him until he gave in. After all, it had worked with Eddie Jones. Fat Lenny Caifano was chosen to lead the plot to bring Rowe into the fold. A charismatic, jovial man weighing 400 pounds, Fat Leonard Caifano had been a close friend of Giancana's since their days in the 42s. He'd even played Santa Claus to Giancana's daughter Antoinette while her father was in prison. On June 19, 1951, while riding in his car, Rowe noticed the vehicle behind him flashing its lights. He pulled over and got out to face down what was coming. "It's time," Caifano said to the two men with him, one of them his brother, as they all climbed out of the car. At exactly the same moment, Rowe's 3 bodyguards, off-duty policemen, appeared out of nowhere and started shooting. Caifano took a slug in his temple. His partners, despite one also taking a hit, were able to leap back into the car. They sped off, leaving Caifano to die in a pool of blood. The bodyguards took off as well. When the police arrived, Rowe said he'd killed Caifano in self-defense. Years later, when Giancana's daughter Antoinette heard of Caifano's death, she recalled her first Christmas when Sam was away in prison. "I guess for as long as I live, I will never forget the moment or the fact that the man in the red suit was Fat Leonard. He had bought those skates for me. He had rented the red suit and played Santa Claus so that a little girl wouldn't lose her belief in Santa Claus. It is hard even now to realize that Fat Leonard was one of Sam's professional killers, a man who lived by the gun and eventually died by it. Sam was upset with the 2 men he'd sent with Caifano on the road job. One of his strictest rules stemming from his days with the 42s was never, ever leave one of your own behind. He let the 2 men live, but made sure they'd never move up in the outfit. At Caifano's funeral, Giancana said the words that were on everyone's mind. "Rowe's a fucking dead man." Not only had Rowe refused to give up his business, he'd now killed Santa. albeit in self-defense. The Santa suit was stored away, never to be worn again. On August 4th, 1952, two men waited in a Chevrolet across from Rowe's home. He emerged at 10 p.m. This time there were no bodyguards in sight. As he walked to his car, two men ran up behind him and opened fire with shotguns. The force of the shots lifted Rowe off his feet and into a tree before he ended up in the gutter. It was the end of the tough policy boss of Chicago. What Giancana didn't know was that Rowe had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and was not expected to live much longer anyway. It was one of the reasons why Rowe decided against being accompanied by his bodyguards. He had balls. It was a fucking shame to kill him, the FBI recorded Giancana saying in the 1970s. After his wife's death, Giancana began work on a family mausoleum. He announced that his father's remains would be placed there too. One day Chuck visited the site, surprised to find his brother there. Ever notice how the sunlight and the shadows make a cemetery look like rows of piano keys? Sam said as he stared out across the graves, then continued, I noticed it when I first came out here. When I did, well, I kinda realized something. It's all one big fucking game, Chuck. No matter what tune you play, this is where you end up. Death. It's the great equalizer. As 1955 was drawing to a close, Accardo wanted to take a backseat role in the running of the outfit. After being heavily scrutinized by the IRS, he decided he wanted to move out of the limelight. The two men came to an agreement. Giancana would run the show, with Accardo staying on as an advisor. Giancana had finally reached his goal. He was now boss of the outfit. He held a party on New Year's Eve and invited everyone from the outfit. It was a memorable night. Giancana was in a playful mood, even getting involved in shaving cream fights with the rest of the guests. Chuck recalled many years later. It was nice to see my brother let his hair down, and it was rare to see him like that in front of the guys, but it was great. We had great camaraderie that night. Business would always take precedence over partying for Giancana, and in 1957, that involved murder. A banker named Leon Marcus was indicted for embezzling bank funds. Under pressure from police, he decided to use his relationship with Giancana as a get-out-of-jail card. Marcus handled many transactions for Giancana, such as the purchase of the River Road Motel in Rosemont in 1956. He renamed it to the Thunderbolt, and the place was heavily renovated to Giancana's specification. He used his brother Chuck to run it as a legitimate business. No one knows if it was Marcus's naivety or his sheer stupidity that would prompt his next move. He decided to blackmail Giancana in his upcoming trial, saying that if he didn't help him, he'd spill the beans about his dealings. This was not a smart move. 7 out of 10 times when we hit a guy, we're wrong, Giancana once said, but the other 3 times we hit, we make up for it. This would be one of the 3 right times. Giancana no longer did hits himself. He'd give this one to Willie Potatoes Didano. Didano then dispatched Sal Moretti not only to kill Marcus, but more importantly, to retrieve the $100,000 cash bill of sale from the banker's wallet. On March 31, 1957, Leon Marcus was eliminated. Moretti invited friends so they could enjoy the killing of Marcus. However, Moretti foolishly forgot to retrieve the bill of sale from Marcus's pockets, along with traveler's checks and cash, which ruled out robbery as being a motive for the slaying. Police quickly found the bill of sale and pulled in Giancana for questioning. 3 days later, the body of Sal Moretti had been found in the trunk of an abandoned car. His body had been stuffed into a dry cleaning bag. There were deep lacerations in his skull, burn marks on his wrists, and cuts on both knees. He'd been shot 4 times, twice in the head. The labels on his clothes had been cut off, making identification harder for police. The only item remaining in the body, however, was an aluminum comb, a warning to others, always to comb clean any crime scene or end up like Moretti. Giancana attended Moretti's wake with his daughter Antoinette. Years later, she found out that Moretti was murdered on the orders of her father. It would be the end of one chapter and the beginning of another.